is awesome.
So good. Yeah. Which are a lot. I mean, it's needed. So.
Yeah. Well, a little over a year. Yeah, that's all we done.
Yeah, that's kind of what we got to do. We were like guesstimating, what, and I was like, under 2 inches. So, report back. We want a rain
You
date.
want the same amount?
Yes.
You good?
Yeah. We want a rain date, we just haven't gotten around to doing it. I have a glass on the front porch. That works.
Yeah.
All right.
I got almost 2 inches.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, town can agree.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think we get more than
It's
some of the rest.
funny, there are several pages that are online speed.
Yeah.
And there can be that kind of difference, really odd.
Well, you can see the rainstorms coming. They get to Wood Creek and they go. Yeah. It's like there's a hatchet here and just.
Well, last week it
All right, yeah. Great. I'm gonna call this meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Work Group to order. Get a roll call.
Co-chair Aurora LeBrun, co-chair Deborah Hines,
Here.
member Justin Camp,
Here.
member Jason Donaldson, member Lydia Johns,
Here.
member Jerry Moore,
Here.
member Craig Posey, member Danny Ross, member Bill Tillwater.
Already corrected.
I know what's happening down here. Show up.
Hopefully he's okay. I haven't seen him in a while. He had an email saying he was leaving the group.
Oh.
He did not. So
Oh.
he's technically still part of the group until he lets us know he's not. But we're about to wrap up. So yeah, good news. All right. So we have no public comments, nothing online. Okay. So we're going to proceed right into our agenda item here. I guess the minutes didn't make it.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I haven't checked my email. So we're just going to move straight into the regular agenda. The item is to discuss and take appropriate action on the first reading of the City of Wood Creek Comprehensive Plan. So I need a motion to start the discussion.
Okay, I move that we start discussion on the first reading of the City of Wood Creek Comprehensive Plan.
Do you have a second?
I second that.
Excellent. All right, so just to give a little reminder of what we're looking at in this document, this is our final draft, but this is the first version of it. So we're kind of starting fresh with it again. Portions of it we've reviewed down to 3 times. Portions of it are completely new. The first time we're seeing it today. So we'll just kind of work through page by page. I do have some email notes from Jerry. Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun has already sent in edits in the document itself. She did some direct edits, and you'll be able to see those strike-throughs now digitally from the version that you all received via email and attached in the packet. So just stop me at any time if you have any comments. And also, as a reminder, we are not looking at the formatting of this. Because remember, committee member Lydia Johns here is going to be reformatting this entire document and cleaning up a lot of that stuff. I just threw the images about where I think they should go. And, you know, obviously we want to make sure we're using as many of the data images as possible. The rest of the things are negotiable. And I'll kind of highlight what I'm talking about. I just sort of threw in things that I already had on my hard drive that we could use. So. Did you have any comments or questions before we get going? No. Okay. So title page, pretty straightforward. The vision statement and the background are 2 things that we've edited 3 times already, so I feel pretty confident about both of those. Moving into the table of contents, there was one minor change I made here. I drew out implementation here on its own. Because when in writing that, it was getting lost in this larger body of information, and I kind of thought it should stand alone the more that I put into it. And it was also, there was a lot of feedback on that item. Specifically, we had a whole meeting about it, where Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun sort of went over this kind of action plan, and then Kate Freeze gave a lot of feedback. So this section just turned out to be a lot more than we had originally anticipated. And I don't know why it does these tabbing adjustments. You'll probably see it do that throughout the document. Yeah, again, we can ignore formatting problems. We're looking at content, and then obviously, writing issues. The introduction, again, this is a section of the document that we've edited 3 times. There should be no real major anticipated changes through that. Acknowledgements is new. So this is branching off from what committee member John's provided us. This was the page that she took and gave us an editing example of and created for us. And then I just sort of expanded on it for her and sort of made it reflect some of the changes that we've had in the staff. If y'all have any suggestions on this area, I tend to be kind of wordy. So if we need to cut back on those kind of things, then
Again, we're gonna go to more, like bulleted type things.
as long as we don't lose content. So
Right,
that's,
we're not gonna lose content.
yeah. So we have our city council. It reflects changes in that governing body. Councilmember Judy Brizendine has resigned. Now Joe Quintarva is on there. Administration, for example, Joe has resigned, Renton resigned, so Linda kind of retired. So those changes are in there. If we by chance hire a new city manager, we can always come in and edit that document easily. Comprehensive plan work group, this is us. We've had a couple people that have left. This reflects everybody who's technically still part of the group. Thomas Long is not an official member, but he has been working on the fiscal aspects with Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun, so I did name him for his efforts there.
Is he back in the country
I
yet?
have no idea. I don't know.
Now that it's rained, maybe we'll.
I know he was involved in the initial planning stages for that group, and so the information that Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun presented on his involvement, but yeah, we have not heard from him in a bit. So here's, the planning and zoning. I went ahead and listed Parks and Recreation, Platinum Panel, and Ordinance Review. Platinum Panel is the only one that's kind of directly influencing portions of this plan moving forward of these 3 groups, but we do reference the Parks Department as well because of like some master parks plan improvements that we could recommend. And then here's ordinance review as they currently stand in the tree board. So plan creation, this is a new portion of the document. You can see here where, I'm not really sure, oh, the comma is the suggestion there. So I'll be going through and accepting Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun's edits as we move through. So basically our plan had 4 phases. We formed the work group. We started the survey, then the survey was reviewed and Kate Freeze gave us reports, and from that we created this concept of a system of focus groups. That's where we got natural systems, physical systems, fiscal systems, and land use. From there we moved into months of meetings with this group every 2 weeks about, which had a lot of discussions, and then we created the future land use workshop, which resulted in even more citizen feedback. It was almost like a second survey. Then we are moving into our last stage, which is the final drafting of this plan. It's reviewed by planning and zoning, and then the city council will be the last step in the process of implementing this plan into code. Here is a picture of the future land use workshop. You might want to pop out dear Lynn, the new for. I just put it in its raw form, so if you don't mind, you can edit that. I could do these now.
Once you send me the raw document back in Word.
Not necessarily support you. All right. So this section is again something that we have reviewed many times. This is the 3rd review of the overview. The new portions here are photos. Again, Lydia, you can cut things like this. They're there for you to use in the event that you need space fillers. And then obviously, if you feel like you need to go out and get more photos, these are all results of free images searches. So as far as like users' rights, as far as I know, I can tell they're free. So that is that. Images, more images. Okay, so this chart, Justin, you were gonna fix for us. Good idea, Jerry. I don't, have you been able to email it to me yet?
No.
Okay, so Justin is working on cleaning up this chart. The applications I'm using have limited functionality. Justin has access to better ones. I've sent him the data to create this. We've already seen this chart though, so I'm gonna keep moving. This is our city map, which hopefully we'll get an updated version eventually. Wood Creek age range, this is something that Justin did fix for us already, so that's a newer graph. Yeah, it looks a lot better.
I'm sorry, what's the map left?
It's
That's
just
our
our
city limit.
city map, our zoning. But yeah, first, we've gone out to, we are in the process of requesting bids for an update to this map. For city council's direction, I think we have at least one vote. Three, all right, how exciting. All right, so age of population, Justin's gonna work on this bad boy a little bit to make it, I mean, it's pretty simple as it stands, but he can kind of clean up where it's a little bit more explanatory what's going on here. And it will look very similar to what already has. Last one. If I'm moving too fast, please stop me. I tend to be quick in processing and speaking, so we need to slow down. All right. These are edits from Aurora. Okay, there's a lot. I'll do this later. Okay, so environmental analysis. This is an area that is produced directly from focus group work that we did. So when you saw this, you actually did see this as a subsection and reviewed and edited once already, but it has not come back before you until today. This photo is a little bit difficult to read. I thought it could stand alone, maybe if you can get it to work. If not, there's these cutouts I made of it. If none of it works, that's fine. We can just put these in the definitions. But, you know, we reference things like steep slopes and riparian buffers in the document. So that's why I was sort of attached to this. I also liked the way that it gave us this visual of our topography because we directly live in a valley, a river valley, two of them actually, a creek and a river converging. That's what the entire Wimberley Valley is, and Wood Creek in particular sits on top of one of the tributaries, Hog Creek or Cypress Creek. So all of our residents in the city limits live in some version of this, and steep slope extends out into our ETJ. And steep slopes are something that you can regulate for water quality. And so they are a way to access limiting of development for us by regulating our steep slopes. All right, so I'm going to go through and accept your edit changes later. It's a little bit time consuming. But the language in this section hasn't changed. All I did was add these photos. This is really interesting to me because you can kind of see how we're living in this waterway basin. Yeah, this was a really interesting image from the Cypress Creek Watershed website. You can see that everywhere we live in Wood Creek here is in the Cypress Creek Watershed. So everything we do development-wise impacts our aquifer and significantly. So if you see we're even in this lower area here, that means that what we do on the surface is even closer to what's going on underground. Picture the bridge. And some of these images aren't the best quality, so if you need to adjust them to make them smaller. Isn't?
That's what the bridge used to look like.
Yeah.
Wow.
That picture is at least 12 years old. Because the big trees are not growing up in the dam. You see where they're starting to be, but yeah. It is beautiful.
Yeah, it's this beautiful. All right, Jacob's Well, we'll hash out of that. This is another sort of educational image I like that sort of shows us these concepts of drainage zones, recharge zones. It helps define these terms, but also gives residents a visual of what we're talking about when we discuss like the fault line, the creeks, Jacob's Well, and what a karst aquifer looks like. When I lived in Wimberley 20 years ago or whatever, nobody was walking around talking karst all the time. Now it's this universal term people are using, and I had to educate myself on it. And so that's been a learning opportunity for me. Another just sort of educational image for us. We do have fissures, caves, and sinkholes in Wood Creek. We also have seeps where the water is just kind of seeping up out of the ground. So these are just environmental factors that make this area unique. These are pictures of the rain barrel catchment system that was installed for the golf course, and this looks like, I'm not really sure this is the rain garden image. This is taken directly from the Cypress Creek Watershed website. We partnered with them, we worked with them several years ago, you can see here 2018, to implement our impervious coverage guidelines. Our water quality code in our chapter is directly resulting from this alliance with this organization, and they work with the Meadow Centers out of San Marcos. And so they had kind of a multi-step plan for Wood Creek to get us helping to preserve the watershed. And so some of those things like these direct actions did take place. Like I said, the change in our code was part of it. There were several other things that have not happened. For example, rainwater collection on the roof here would be something that we could, push for in the future. Again, there are grants and things, and there's funding through them as well to accomplish some of these goals. So yeah, this kind of concludes this section here. The golden chief warbler, oak willow. Again, this is talking about the riparian structure. So a lot of people kind of complain about what our riverbed looks like, specifically the tall grasses on the sides of it. Because yeah, it can be a fire hazard. That's a real concern. Balancing those concerns with flood mitigation is maybe best left to professionals who know how to do those equations. But what we do know is that leaving these wetlands here like this and not touching them helps prevent flooding up here. And so when we are heading into these big rain events like we are this week, leaving these structures down here will actually ensure that the water is slowed down, is held in the creek bed, and gives it kind of just, I don't know how to describe it, it's just sort of like brakes almost on the water. So it keeps the water from rushing down to the Gulf as fast. The more of this kind of debris we have in the creek bed. It's also a big part of why they told us not to clean up our cypress trees that were destroyed in the Memorial Day flood, was because they build up these zones and actually make the creek bed healthier. It might not look aesthetically pleasing, it's not your manicured yard, but it's important. All right, so again, most of the language in that section has not changed. Natural systems. Now, this, when we saw it last, was just a outline. So a lot of this has just been directly filled in by me, but we all discussed it, approved these sections. I did kind of adjust how it was ordered. So when I was looking at Kate Freeze's documents about natural systems, they had these 4 things listed: land, water, life, and air. So I kind of lumped all of our discussion topics into those 4 categories. So we addressed land first, which is our parks and green spaces. Since we first started these discussions, City Council has approved a green space protection and a new tree ordinance that builds greater protections for our trees and make these green spaces into our code. We do have a current Parks Master Plan, and we do have budget allocated for working on these in regards to like maintenance. We are applying for grants. We do park improvements as well. So we have a handful of parks. This is Augusta Park. It's where Augusta meets Augusta. This is Veterans Memorial Park. It's at the entrance. Creekside is a new park on the side of Hog Creek on Brook Hollow. Okay, so one champion circle is technically a designated park. We don't really do anything with it. It's undeveloped. It does have 2 parking spots though. It's on the other side of the Memorial Park at the entrance. One champion circle, oh, that's what it is. The triangle is often viewed as a park, however, it's not. It's actually just a collection of designated right-of-way spaces that forms that gap in that land. It does have some park-like amenities like a bench. There's an old flagpole there. There's some landscaping there. There's a lot of potential for this space, and depending on who is current administration implementing improvements on this space could move forward. There has been hesitation in the past of improving right-of-ways in general. There's nothing specifically saying we can't, and in fact, now we have things in the code that say we should, we can. There are more green spaces throughout our community. Oh, look, it's the man. So this is a really special green space. It's kind of a new feature in our community. It's the first of its kind, this sort of like designated planter right-of-way green space. There used to be something here that was sort of removed. It was the lesser version of this, but it was wider and there was issues with traffic as this area got more developed, with people being able to pull out of their driveways and things. So the city did remove what was there and then just replaced it, and they reinstalled the sign in the last year. So just a good little photo off of what we're talking about. Because a lot of times we talk about, oh, right-of-way green space or median. You know what these words mean, but then you have to stop and think, okay, what does this mean in Wood Creek? So here's a map that I updated for us. It addresses all of the street trees, green spaces, and parklands of the city. So you can see that we don't have a whole lot, but we do have some. And yeah, so the street trees, so like on Champion Circle, there's street trees there. There's some on Palmer. I think Brook Meadow is probably the most well-known. There used to be some on Brook Hollow as well. They were removed when Brook Hollow was updated. A lot of them are failing. Unfortunately, when you pave around the root structure of a tree, it compromises it. And so the city will likely in the future need to take some more aggressive measures to improve upon and save these spaces and help these trees to kind of recuperate from what happens to them when the road cleans up. So water, I kind of lumped all the waters together. Wood Creek is a groundwater dependent community. I think that's probably the most important aspect of this when we're discussing water with anyone is that, yes, we have city water, but we're dependent on our aquifer. It's not like we're pulling from a massive lake like some cities. We're not piping it in. So we are really bound by whatever's in our aquifer. We did learn recently that the Middle Trinity does recharge, which is really cool because if we take care of our resources, we actually won't run out. It's not a finite source. It does recharge. The Hayes Trinity Groundwater Management is the name of the state regulatory body who is responsible for water management here. And then we have 2 natural waterways, and that's sort of what this map shows. It also shows like our riparian buffer that I keep talking about, our floodways. This is kind of an interesting map to me. A lot of people don't realize that Hog Creek really does cut it down in half. So these visuals, I think, help with that. All right. So this is one of those sections that had a weird issue with converting to PDF. I don't know what's going on. Actually, Lydia, when you go, you might be able to just copy and paste from here, but this section in particular had a lot of strange, I don't know what's going on with the text. I can't figure it out. There's nothing in the settings that I can find. It was not converting to PDF properly. I had to create all of these spaces for the text to show up. It was like falling over the image. You'll see. I'll see, but yeah. So environmental protection efforts have increased in the last 30 years. This kind of talks about the Meadow Center, the Zevers Creek watershed protection that we have going on. The Wimberley Valley Watershed Association is a nonprofit group that's not really affiliated with us, but they were instrumental in the effort to preserve Jacob's Well, which is the headwaters of Cypress Creek, which does directly impact our community. Rainwater collection is allowed, and in fact, the state really tries to get cities to encourage it. The city has some guidelines on it, but we don't really do much to encourage it at all. So that could be an area we look at. Rain gardens exist. There's one at Augusta Park. Expanding rain gardens can be utilized to control drainage. It is a green or nature-based infrastructure option instead of gray infrastructure. So instead of building like cement culverts, you build rain gardens. You see a lot of this in like Louisiana in particular. They have a lot of, they're called ditches there. But it is a place to catch water and help it flow properly and hold it, and because they have a lot more water. And they build little bridges over them, but they're lining all of the streets. Yeah, so again, this recharge zone of the Middle Trinity is probably one of the most impactful things we can discuss, especially when it comes to development, because this is our key to keeping Wood Creek the way it is. The state does not give cities a lot of ways to regulate in the ETJ, but water quality and watershed management is one of the ways we can regulate in the ETJ. So having access to maps like this and using them when talking with developers gives us muscle in kind of controlling what they do. And it is to our benefit to limit impervious coverage in this area. Any of this green, so if I can go down to this T, the Middle Trinity outcrop or recharge zone, you can see, here's Jacob's Well, Wood Creek's all up in here. There's Campion Judea. So a lot of the golf course falls on this here, a lot of their land falls on it. So this recharge zone branching out into our ETJ, it's incredibly important we protect it because this is how we have our water. So if we pave over all of this recharge zone, our aquifer won't keep charging. And as you can see, it stretches way north of us, and there's not a lot of development up here. But this is kind of getting close to Dripping Springs, and we're seeing that pouring down a development from driftwood. So this is going to be a high area of concern in the years moving forward for us to try to regulate development. Questions?
It's a great map.
Yeah, this is from the Wimberley Watershed Association. She came, Robin Garrett, yeah, she came and presented to City Council, and she referenced this map in her discussion. I was like, whoa, 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 I want that.
Yeah, she's an incredible photographer. Looks very. Glad you were able to.
Yeah, so one of the really cool things about this, which kind of goes unnoticed because we're looking at all this other stuff, is you can see where Aqua Service is, and then you can see where like Wimberley Water Supply Service is. Aqua has 3 main taps: Wood Creek North, Eagle Rock. I think Eagle Rock is with Wood Creek North, Mountain Crest, and us. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting, that service boundary that they have, and that we were told that the Hayes Trinity Groundwater Management District cannot approve any more permits in the Jacob's Well Management Zone that's happened to the Middle Trinity. So that's an interesting kind of factoid we learned that seems relevant. So there's some development control there. The Jacob's Well Management Zone isn't on this map as much. This is just talking about the Cypress Creek waters. Oh, sorry, Jacob's Well. That's it. So it doesn't give the boundary for it. There's another map with a better boundary for that. Anyway, questions? So next is live plants and animals. Here we address oakwell, golden cheek warblers. We talked about the tree board, how they're creating a tree inventory for us. We talked about how new ordinances passed to protect heritage and protected trees. The golden cheek warblers are an endangered species, and they need the ash juniper stands to survive. That's where they make their nest. And a lot of people around here like to cut down what we call saber trees. And they are actually really good for our environment. There's been a lot of miseducation in the past about them, talking about them being water sucks and things like that, that aren't accurate. So education is key, right? Get residents to care, we have to educate, you have to put it in your official documents where people stumble upon it and go learn more. Overpopulation of deer brings concern of disease and large predators moving into the area. Wood Creek has a ton of deer. A lot of people like them. Some people low-key feed them. I'm not going to get into that debate, but it is a primary portion of life around here is the large amount of deer. Air. So right now we don't really suffer from air quality issues. It's directly related to the fact that we have no large-scale industrial manufacturing plants in our area. We also have limited population in general still in the valley, even though we've seen exponential growth. So we don't have a lot of car pollution and exhaust pollution. We do experience Sahara dust every once in a while. That increases the particulate matter. More traffic will bring more noise pollution. The city could consider addressing that in the future along Range Road 12. And then I referenced our international lights out from the migratory bird species. We see about 1/3 of the national migratory birds move through this area. And so if we turn out our lights, actually we're in that time period right now, apparently. Yep. Yeah, so turn out your lights at night. Physical systems. We get into public utilities. It's just kind of a basic introduction here. Wood Creek does not own any of its own utilities right now. They are all provided by private companies, and we have franchise agreements with these companies. And in some cases, it creates a deal with where it's sole providing. For example, our trash and recycling waste connections is the only company you can get trash service through here. So, and then some of these other ones like Spectrum, you can put in satellite. You don't have to use Spectrum. They're just the only ones with cable. Infrastructure, roads. I actually recalculated this number this morning. Let me see if it's 9. I'll do it again. Anyway, so roads. We all know the conditions of the streets are really bad. And this has been a top priority for our citizens to address. This just basically goes into the details of that. Gives us some of the engineering studies we have. As Platinum Panel member Cody Abney has expressed, this map is outdated at this point, even though it's not very old, because we've had major flooding events again. So anytime we have major flooding events, it further erodes our road.
You see that?
It is a rating standard, and it's right there. So I included this chart on purpose. It's kind of hard to read at this size. We might need to make it bigger, but it's basically just, you know, shows which of the roads are in serious condition and kind of the maintenance needed. Some of them need reconstruction, some of them need rehabilitation, some of them just need preventative measures. So this is where the Platinum Panel is kind of getting in there and digging in and saying, like, what roads can we just do milling and chip seal? What roads do we need to do full reconstruction of? They're also looking at drainage concerns.
So that's measured by public perception, or is that something Kate Freeze?
Yeah, they went in and did a massive engineering study. Like, I think they did the study in 2019 and presented it in 2020, early spring. And so that is like the most recent relevant data we have to work with. So the roads haven't gotten better, you know that, except for Wood Creek Drive. So that one has been improved upon. So as far as any of these ratings, you can expect that they've just deteriorated further. But you know, it gives us a good jumping up point for the Platinum Panel in regards to how they're going to plan and kind of tackle the process of improving drainage. So we have no official drainage infrastructure. It basically everything just sheet flows through our city, down the roads, and trails and pedestrian mobility and alternative forms of mobility are something that has popped up in every citizen survey we've taken. I think even in our old vision plans is kind of like just a side area of concern. It took a forefront or like a front burner priority list in the most recent survey. Was in the top 4 things that the community wants the city to address. So, you know, first come roads, and those are going to be very expensive. but we can definitely get in motion about trails as far as like getting some engineering studies. We've established where they're preferred in the most recent future land use workshop. You'll see those maps in a little bit. City Hall is not something we discussed originally, but I threw this in here because this is a massive piece of infrastructure that we own. It is an asset. It needs repairs. It needs new hardware. So we oftentimes kind of overlook City Hall, but at the same time, it's also been the center of discussions of expansion at times. So I just wanted to make sure it was in our plan. There's nothing in our current surveys that want us to address City Hall. Pressures to address it have more recently come from like elected officials or people working in City Hall. So as far as like direct citizen desires for taxpayer money, this does not come up as a big priority. But obviously the people who work here matter and what they need matters, so it needs to be in our home plan. Water hydrants and flush valves is new. This was not in here previously, but it is a system, an infrastructure system we have. Architects owns it, they maintenance it. We've had extensive discussions about what they are and what they can and can't do. This is just a very brief summary of that. The school. So again, we had these focus groups. This was presented in an outline format. We discussed it together in the meeting. There was a presentation ran by Mayor Bridget Brand. She previously worked with City Manager Lewis and Thomas Palm on this aspect of the plan, and I just wrote it up for her. So we are ad valorem dependent. Only 14% of our income comes from sales tax, 33% comes from franchise agreements. These are just average numbers based on like the most recent revenue inputs. But as you can see, over 50% of our income comes from property taxes. I won't discuss if that's common or not common because there's like thousands of cities and all of them have their little nuances. But what I will say is that there are some benefits to having so much ad valorem in that it is steady. People pay their property taxes. If they don't, they lose their property. Sales tax fluctuates more, so it can be harder to create a long-term financial plan that you can count on. So our city does benefit from really knowing what our income is going to be year to year. But cities that have more retail income in general tend to have greater wealth. And cities that have draws for that kind of income, they call it economic muscle. This new term. What it means is when you bring in outside money to your community and it stays. So big box stores don't do that. Big box stores take your community's money and send it to their corporation, and sometimes they're what does bring economic muscle are small mom and pop places that visitors come to and like and drop money at. So that keeps money in your community. That is economic muscle. That is what the city wants to look for when it looks at what businesses would be beneficial. Land availability concerns. We have very little land left inside the city. There's almost no commercial zoning inside the city. And when we talk about retail and things like that, we're like looking at the UTJ primarily. We also suffer from aquifer availability and groundwater management issues, and so these zones that are set up to protect those also limit development possibilities, which is a good thing, but not when you're talking about income. So it's kind of a weird balance there. Financial stability. The city is incredibly financially stable. We have really good financial policies in place, investment policies. We do generate passive income. We do have healthy reserves. We have good, strong credit rating. So as far as financial stability goes, the city's in a really good place. We only have 2 more payments left on our current debt service note that we have. And then we're looking at rolling into more debt for the road. Project funding realities. Current projects funded on future growth is not a viable or sustainable financial policy. And we actually directly heard from Hilltop Securities recently, when you're talking about the most fiscally responsible thing you can do. One of the things he said was counting on property values going up or the growth of the community can be very dangerous. It can get you into a planning hole, essentially, because if your property values stagnate or there's a year with like less development and you were counting on those increases to get new debt service, you can spell out your projects pretty big. So that's why when he gave us advice, he said, a bond election is better on that front, because you get all of the money you need, planned for and allotted upfront, versus a series of tax notes. Tax notes rely, reissuing them relies on our taxes going up. So that, we basically tell the citizens, like, we want your property values to go up through that. So this will come back around when we talk about our goals, essentially. So land use, we have reviewed this portion together. The new things are pictures. This is something Kate Reese provided us, which goes over all of our land use designations for the entire ETJ, which I thought was really awesome to see all in one, just like Passover. Let's see what else. Like I said, we've reviewed all of this. There's some edits in here from Mayorperson LeBrun, and then, like I said, Jerry, I do have your edits, and I will incorporate those. Citizen survey focus area, we've reviewed this together. It's just basically, I put into words what K3 has had in our.
Is it off?
This computer is on. The power to City Hall went out. Power to City Hall went out.
Yeah, we probably lost it.
I'm gonna be hoarse now.
You guys don't have to pay.
Okay, so we were still recording?
Yeah.
Alright, you guys have nothing to look at.
I'll let you look. There.
Computer good.
Oh, great. And there's like Netflix on this. You guys have a lot of movie days?
No, not a one. It's cool that it's not TV though.
Okay. All right, so it looks like Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun tore up this section. We've, funny enough, reviewed this. This would have been the fourth reading on it, but that's okay. We'll put our edits in. Again, just a chart from our survey, it's highlighting those things I talked about. Improving roadways is number one, maintaining our number 2. Here you see pedestrian and bike mobility coming up in the third, and then protecting trees as our fourth. Drainage issues and traffic calming coming in as fifth and sixth. Are 7th, protecting groundwater. So you can see, when you look at this chart and you think about what this plan covers later on in the goals, it's hitting on those top 10 priorities that we have, our top 8, I guess. So future development growth goals. This was coming from the survey. Again, we've reviewed this 3 times. We addressed mobility. Again, this is Kate Freese's report. I just put it into paragraph 1. Visions for Wood Creek. So if we can really kind of throw in our focus now, because this is the new portion and probably the most influential and important part of the document that we've created. So vision for Wood Creek, this is looking forward, our natural systems. When we were here talking about how to structure this section, Brandon from K Freeze said, goals, it's not a thing. You have one goal. Goals are singular. So I looked at each of these things and I established one goal. I took all of the feedback, all of the discussions we've had, and I summarized it. So for natural systems, the goal is to preserve Wood Creek's natural and rural setting. You saw that directly above in the citizen survey. Under that, I created strategies. And when Brandon talked about your strategies, he said, keep them broad. Don't get into too specific of details, because those come out later as you're working in the strategy. If you try to put them in the comp plan becomes too heavy, too burdensome, and people will stop looking at it because there's nothing to get there. It's just too much information. So I tried to keep this simple. So we're talking about bullet points. We'll really move into that now. So So strategy 1, protect what exists. The action plan, enforce protective regulations for trees, create community education programs, incentivize rainwater, protect impervious coverage limits, create strong regulation for our ETJ in the Middle Trinity Aquifer Recharge and Jacob Hole Management Zones, create green building incentives, promote the protection of natural habitats, our Arbor Day event, tree planting events, and invest in public lands. Do you guys have anything to add there? Strategy 2, increase and improve upon our parks and green spaces. So this goes beyond just protecting what we have and actually reinvesting our resources as taxpayers back into it. So the action plan would be to update our parks master plan. It is dated at this time. We've moved in a different direction as far as some of the planning goes for like park improvements already. So we need to update that plan. People talk about not being satisfied with our parks, and the number one thing they said is, what parks? We have almost none. And then there aren't any amenities on the ones that we have. So we got a lot of direction in open comments of that survey of like, hey, we want you guys to do something about this. Pursuing more parkland with the goal of 1 acre per 80 people. The standard formula a lot of cities look for. Going to be hard to achieve for Wood Creek given that so much of our land is already committed. But when we're looking at CPTJ, when we're looking at acquiring land and what we do with it, that's where that formula comes into play. Another standard goal is no more than a 10-minute walk to green space. This is kind of like a public health thing too. A lot of people have done studies on this. They say that people need access to green spaces, even if they don't use them. The fact that it's there, they have a place to go, is really important. Specifically around things like our townhomes, our apartment complexes, those high density developments need green space. Here's just a chart from the survey. We need to negotiate parkland designations in our future development in the ETJ. 15% minimum acre of suitable, suitable being the key word. A lot of times they try to give us flood zones or something like that. Suitable parkland per acre of land to be developed or a cash and lieu payment system. Right now we don't have any of this in place. We could establish it through our subdivision and planning regulations. We need to revise and review the planning and subdivision codes to promote green space allocation and design. We can pursue grants and other funding opportunities to improve parks. Oh, I wrote first. Now you're gonna see me not know how to spell this. Hold on. S-U-E, right? Okay, so we can consider and plan on how to achieve the citizen goal of community pool. Community pool has about as many people not liking it as liking it. So this is not a top priority for us at this time, but it's something to kind of keep in mind at all times because people, specifically those with mobility access issues, would benefit from a pool. So when we talk, we're like, oh, the creek, well, the creek is not accessible for everyone. So that's not necessarily as realistic as it is, as we think it is, right? Considering placement of a dog park. Dog parks have popped up now and again. Here you see pet-friendly areas. I feel like one champion circle with a little bit of fencing could be great for that. Basically, people like a place to take their dog, hang out, where they can be off-leash. So Wood Creek currently has no off-leash options. The Wood Creek apartment complex is not open. Again, just more citizen feedback that was used in writing up these goals. So having these charts back our information is important. So now we get to the physical systems. The one goal for the physical systems is to improve existing structures with a focus on roads and mobility. So again, roads, pedestrian mobility, number one thing. Strategy 1, renegotiate franchise agreements to seek lower rates and improve customer service. Basically, there was a whole lot of stuff about people liking, not liking these services. Aqua Texas gets the worst rating. That's why their chart is in here. That is the one service that everybody really, really, really wants the city to fix. The rest of it was about 50-50. I just kind of documented those open comments. Strategy 2, repair all the roads and create a long-term maintenance plan. So we need a master transportation plan and policy that addresses regular maintenance. So Platinum Panel is already working on that. This is Wood Creek Drive after it was refinanced. We need to create a capital improvements plan. So that looks at all of our capital needs all at once, assesses our fiscal capacity, it manages our reserves, our operating budgets, We're already working on this, but this is the kind of thing that we need to finalize into policy, and we need to update regularly because, you know, the roads need regular maintenance, but also City Hall will need maintenance. And the city will look at debt service all the time for this kind of stuff. We do not, because we're limited to ad valorem, and our ad valorem is limited because most of our land is built out, we have a really set income. So for any big projects, we will likely need to seek debt or grant. To do that, you need these plans in place. These companies, the grant people, they want to see that you've done this homework in advance. So if we get these things in place and written actual policy documents, they'll put us in a better standing for grants, for bonds, for tax notes, all of that. More charts from our citizen input. This came directly from the Future Land Use Workshop. What I loved about this is it gave, we need to make sure the platinum panel sees this, but it tells us what are the priorities for fixing our road. And a lot of times people say Champion Circle's fine. But if you look at it, obviously the people on Champion Circle don't agree, and it's coming up as a high priority for us for fixing. Same with Augusta Drive. We knew these needed it, but they're getting a lot of feedback of they need to be fixed. And then near Cypress Point, we don't own this portion, but what the city can do is work on negotiations with the owner to improve this area. Hopefully we will be able to achieve something eventually with them. Again, pursuing grants is going to pop up all over the place. We need to address traffic calming with our road improvements and same with drainage, and the platinum panel is working on that. This chart was just direct feedback about like what people want, you know, more street trees, rain gardens. If you notice, none of these kind of pops up here. It says neighborhood streets, so I put in this chart to kind of tell you what neighborhood streets are. And what this was just a post-it note. They added it and had about like 6 or 5 on it. People didn't want anything. So
Those numbers down there.
yeah, there was about 100 people that came to the Future Land Use Workshop, and this is the feedback they gave on this map. They kind of put where they needed the improvements and what kind of improvements they wanted to see out of these categories. Medians, crosswalks, lighting, rain garden, street trees, drainage elements. Oh, here's that chart. So you can see these little, none of these, some people came out over here, they don't want anything on the street.
We don't want any improvement.
Yeah, well, you know, they don't want us changing things. So, you know, it comes back to when you present the plan to the people, I mean, they get the final say, right? But if you show them a crosswalk that looks like this, I don't know if you can see that. Probably a lot of people in Woodford go like, no, you know, or sidewalks. Look at that, it's a concrete sidewalk. We know people in Woodford don't want a concrete sidewalk. They want walking trails, they want permeable things for the water,
Like crushed granite.
right? Yeah. So some of it's the visuals, and Keith Rees worked and did the best they could. They likely recycle a lot of these models with their work. You know, it's not as Wood Creek specific as people, but you know, some people just don't want anything. That's totally fine. You know, they want things to change. What mobility improvements would you like to see? So again, pedestrian mobility is the #1 priority. We have a lot of people who like to get outside and be physically active, whether it's walking their dogs, pushing their strollers, going for a run. This is a top priority for our citizens. And it, like the roads, will likely be very expensive, and it's going to be very controversial because it will likely mean that people will have to accept that the front portion of their yard doesn't actually belong to them. It is a right of way, and it's under the right for the city to improve upon it if they decide, but all of this will come out in the communication of any effort. And I've seen cities, I've referenced it before, Canyon did this, they basically paid people to improve upon the front portion of their road, their lawn, and the right of way they put in sidewalk. And it had a lot of grumbling and struggle at first, and then the end, it had like a near 100% satisfaction rate. People loved it. They got a few $1,000s in their parking lot or pocket, and the front of their yard, in a lot of cases, the drainage issues were addressed because it lifted up the front of the yard and did some landscaping there. So they actually ended up with better looking fronts. than they had before. So I'm not telling you this is how Wood Creek's gonna solve this. Maybe they can work with the golf course and create some sort of agreement where residents could use the golf course in off hours. Maybe we never move forward on this, but I'm just saying that people are wanting it. And so the city has a duty and a responsibility to see how, right? Even if the plan never happens, if the citizens vote it down, we still need to see how. I can put that into motion. Traffic calming, high again. Improving network of trails linking to the Wimberley Valley Trail. So we do know that the county's putting in a lot of trails. They're maybe even planning for one to cut through Wood Creek, and going to negotiate that with property owners. How will our citizens get to that trail, right? So bigger plans in place there. Another action plan on this strategy 3, which is creating walking trails. You see a lot of what we just talked about. Obtaining engineering studies, working on a plan to prioritize. Here you have this. So this is what the citizens want. They want a walking trail down Wood Creek Drive. They want one down Brook Hollow. Those are our 2 major streets. They're the 2 most dangerous streets to walk on.
And that's where most people walk.
So that map to me was really important and interesting. It also highlighted this area here that has very high volume of pedestrian mobility and multiple intersections. So this is kind of a big area of concern in my opinion for the city, and I've actually presented something for council to look at to address that. I think the planning panel talked about it too. So if you look at what roads would people like to walk on, it's just the feedback of that same map.
Ooh.
Thank you, Reese.
Yes,
This tea rain.
Yep.
Sorry, if you can fix it.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I might graphic. Yeah, I might be able to. You just put a thing over.
You want to make a PDF out of that? If you have a keep it, it'll be sweet.
Yeah, that's true. But is it a JPEG or is it, or what is it?
It's a PNG.
It raises, corrects it, and it's
It charges $170 an hour. Yeah, no. That's $100 worth of work right there. No, we'll figure it out. Even if it is having
Can
to
we
adjust.
just, and I,
If you send me that, I can.
Okay.
fix that.
you fix it, thank you. That's the one thing that everybody's going on.
Oh, yeah.
The whole plan will go out the window for that one graphic.
Yeah,
There we go.
we laugh, but I mean, I've seen it happen.
We're in real trouble with my spelling.
No, I'm gonna double check.
So fiscal systems, our one goal is to reduce the burden on taxpayers and over-reliance on increasing ad valorem taxes to fund city projects. This is a little bit controversial because we never specifically said this in our meetings, but this directly comes from me listening to the citizens and kind of compiling all the information and all the conversations we've had. Essentially, people do not want us to keep raising their taxes to pay for things. So we have to figure out how to pay for things, because we do have to pay for them, without constantly relying on increasing the tax. Does that make sense? So, strategy 1, maintain suitable reserves and manage the annual budget to reduce excessive spending. So by having an annual budget each year where we have a surplus from our M&O that can either go back into reserves or be used to pay for projects is important. We have to keep that process up. We cannot keep growing our city budget and expect to have anything in our reserves. And we have to be careful about how we spend our reserves each year and not overspend it any one year. So that just is explained there in the action plan. Strategy 2, increase income outside of ad valorem taxes. We're limited on how to do this. First, we promote and support local businesses. We tell our friends to buy liquor at the liquor store. We tell our friends to golf at the golf course. Truly, that brings money into our community. And we do not have any sort of like commerce building, like, Wood Creek or Wimberley has the Wimberley Chamber of Commerce. And so those organizations work on promoting their local businesses and getting them into flyers and sort of, we don't have that. So it kind of falls on that. You need to use Wood Creek as your designated. People about that, and the other thing that's pretty controversial is looking at our hotel occupancy tax. We have one, it's just set to 0. We could raise it and immediately start generating more income for the city.
Okay, but there's a caveat to hot taxes, and that is that they have to be used to promote those businesses. I know city, Wimberley is having, they've got a lot of money in their funding for hotel occupancy tax, and it's very, very limited on what you can spend.
So it isn't, it isn't. I actually did all this research and I shared it with Jerry and Bill. That is one of the things that has to be used on. It can also be used to improve trips, because what it actually has to be used for is drawing in people to the businesses. Anything that does that, signages, beautifying landscape, working on walking trails, improving communication, pamphlets, brochures, all of that falls under that, and I can share that information with you.
Well, I realize that, but I just wanted to make sure that we all understood that they couldn't be used for roads, they can't be used for this, it's just very narrow.
It can improve our parks.
Yeah, it can improve parks.
Yeah. So what it does is that when you have money coming in from hotel occupancy tax, yes, it can't be used to pay our staff salary. But it can be used to do these other things, which then takes the burden off of our other income to pay for those things. So like improving parks, working on landscaping, those kind of things do fall under the umbrella for if we wanted to go. I don't, so seek advantageous development and franchise agreements. So we can pursue annexation agreements in the ETJ, seeking businesses and residences that represent smart growth and economic muscle. Okay, so these are feedback from Mayor Pro Tem LeBron here. It's mentioned elsewhere that state law says we can't. So this is not totally accurate what she's saying here. We can pursue annexation agreements with new development. So I'll work on the way this is worded. What we can't do is ask Mountain Crest to do it. Right. So Mountain Crest would have to approach
Anything that's already established.
Right.
Not approach.
But when a developer comes in, we can definitely pursue annexation with them in the development agreement. That is under the capability. Creation of an economic development plan and committee. So I guess she's concerned this is controversial. This is a pretty standard thing that cities do. I think just maybe defining this better might be needed, but essentially an economic development plan and committee would just kind of oversee these policies, whether or not it's our financial policies or looking at our subdivision and planning. Maybe we don't do this. This is just a suggestion that's come up several times. I believe Jack Bose is a big proponent of this. But when people hear economic development plan, they think, oh, we're going to be developing. We're likely going to develop if we want to. Having these plans and committees in place gives us the ability to enforce and create regulations and gives us standing if there ever is a court case, because we can say, look at all of these government bodies we have that have made all of these decisions, written these plans. We've done our homework. It just backs us if we ever have to enforce something.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
considering everything you just said, I think Aurora's editing is not proper. I like to consider, like we had it originally, rather than
Right.
damn it, create it.
Yeah.
You know, and which is opposed to what you just said. Create it as you will do this, and versus consider doing it.
Yeah, I'm definitely not advocating for it by any means. It's just consistently come up. Anytime you are researching any of this stuff, every time I've looked at another comprehensive
Oh,
plan.
I know, I was just talking about the editing from considering, which is much smoother than create.
There's wiggle room there without
Yeah.
tying yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Just set yourself up.
Right.
And right now we're having a hard time staffing committees. That's Albert. So, creating another one could be problematic, right? So right now we need to get the business we have in place done, like the 5 mail and us. And then all of you all could apply for something else.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, that's my pitch for the day. So these charts are really interesting to me because they, this is where the economic development plan can come into place because, we have these subdivision plans and we have these plotting regulations and, when we're in negotiations with developers, being able to advocate for certain things is helpful, but also knowing what you're advocating for. So something Brandon has talked about a lot is how much money the city has to put into maintaining things versus how much revenue they bring in. So like a high density subdivision might bring us more property taxes, but it also means a lot more wear and tear on the road. Do they offset each other? Right? Big box stores take up a lot of land. They don't necessarily bring in a lot of revenue for all the land they take up. And then they have aging infrastructure that can't be used for anything else. So when we're advocating for certain types of development or trying to regulate certain types of development, these numbers are really important because they tell us what it brings in. For example, a church brings you nothing because it's nonprofit. Same with the YMCA. I was like, YMCA would solve all of our problems. They would bring us a pool and we have all this. And then previous city manager Britton Lewis was like, yeah, but we don't get any tax money. Okay,
So we have Canton Judeo, which is the same thing. It doesn't bring us tax revenue. Now, they voluntarily give us the city money yearly, and for streets, but I mean, it's the same thing, and that's a big plot of property.
So when we're looking at all of this, we've trots in our future land use map, which helps us have regulatory control over what's going on in undeveloped portions. So that future land use map is where you're like, oh, we should put in things that generate more income, like, a boutique retail place brings in $5,000 per acre, right? Versus box retail is really, really low. Same with gas stations. People talk about wanting a gas station on this side of town. Sure, convenience, but look at how little money it would bring us, right? So I feel like these charts are really helpful. These are calculations provided by Kate Breeze. It's not anything I've come up with. So when people were talking about like what kind of commercial development we want, people's preferences can shift based on when they see these kind of numbers. And they're like, oh, okay, maybe that would be really helpful. So strategy for us to pursue alternative and outside funding always. So we can encourage the Parks Board to pursue the formation of a citizen-based nonprofit. That would give us more access to money. Land use, our goal, maintain Wood Creek's character and promote sustainable resource management. To preserve the rural and residential character of the community. We need to review and update our building and development ordinances. We need to review and update our planning ordinances. We need to protect our watershed. We do that through sustainable building practices, use of like one water building policies, regulating steep slopes and water quality management, promoting water-wise landscaping practices. That's something really simple. We can help educate residents on and advocate for. That's something we can be emotion in, and it doesn't cost us very much. More natural systems maps. We can encourage developers to utilize green building, enforce our heritage and protected tree preservation efforts. Those big, massive trees do a lot for our environment. They provide shade, which cools things. They provide habitat for animals. They hold our soil in place. They're really, really important. So we need to keep up the efforts to keep those. They also are where we get our name. So. What do you always say in Nebraska? Just creek without wood. The sign shows us.
Yeah. City of Creek.
Yeah. So strategy 3 is to seek and encourage development that aligns with resident preferences. So that's again where those big charts come into play. And then I referenced economic muscle again, things that bring in new money rather than recirculating our existing money or taking it away. So when all of our residents go and golf, that's great. It's just recirculating our money. But when new people come and golf, that brings new money to our community. What commercial development would like the city like? This was a really big chart. I just blocked off the top 3 because it fell substantially after these 3. Like it just like dropped down quite a bit. You can see the full graph in the larger plan, but these top 3 seem to be the most supported. So this was from the Future Land Use Workshop. This is just more citizen input. Do people want national retailers? They prefer local. What do people want along Ranch Road 12? Small cafes and coffee shops, right? That's most preferred. Landscaping and beautification, parks, right? Or nothing. Biggest concern with new development is making sure we preserve our resources. Again, so this is just re-echoing everything we've already stated. These graphs give this whole document teeth. This is the map we still need from K-Freeze. I have contacted them. We've asked for it several times. They were waiting post future land use workshop to create it, and I think they just needed us to circle back and remind them. So they are working on that. Implementation, as basically we've reviewed this portion of the implementation. It's just kind of reiterating this fact that this is now becoming a legal document. It will bind future decision makers. They are supposed to follow this. It is referenced in our code. It is supposed to be updated regularly. There's some editing issues in here. It says every 3 to 5 years. Technically, the P&Z is supposed to review this every 2 years. Maybe that concept of review update every 3 to 5 makes sense in the timeline that it takes to start and finish that process. So we'll just kind of look at cleaning this up and implementing. Mayor Pro Tem will run suggestions here. I think she's just kind of cleaning up the wording. When I read this yesterday, I didn't see anything substantial. Here's that portion on the Wimberley Valley that we've talked about. Here's our summary of key action items. This is the most important thing in this entire plan. In fact, we could probably delete the rest of it and keep it. So this is what our goals are as a state. Preserve our rural setting, protect our trees, invest in parkland, repair roads, create a regular maintenance plan, address pedestrian safety, reduce the burden on taxpayers through over-reliance on increasing ad valorem income, improve and strengthen development regulations in order to reduce impact on the aquifer and maintain wood security. Here's our glossary. This is probably the part I need the help with the most on y'all because I'm too close to these terms to know what needs to be in here. I mean, there's nothing in this document I don't understand anymore. So what do you think we need in here?
We talked about definition of feeder roads.
Oh, collector road. That has
Collector road.
We don't use it anymore in the document. So you think?
Never.
Well, it's not used in document.
I'm gonna put something on here about roads. Road terms. Maybe the economic muscle term, even though it's defined in the document.
Because that's something that
Maybe
is a
even the state law about it.
yeah.
You use economic development and economic muscle.
Yeah, I'll reorder this to be alphabetical and yeah, that was the number one.
Oh.
Vicky, do you have anything to add? Would you like to talk now? You've been through it all.
There is one thing that I noticed about page 12 or so to say that you have not received the results of the 2020 census.
As far as I know, they're still not.
Really? Redistricting was done over a year ago.
I know.
It was based on the census.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to find it last night and I couldn't find anything specific.
I mean, last time I heard what Brenton was quoting based on what he had, 1750, 1747.
So what's been released from the census was just the first phase, which is used in redistricting, and it's just estimations on demographics. And it's based on the data, but there are still estimations that It's like the broad overview of what was produced. I could check again, but you said you checked last night, so I checked, I think it was like a month ago. And as far as I know, it's the whole thing hasn't been released yet. I don't know what's, this is not normal, is what I can say, is, but it to take this long. Now, I think there's like, I know there's 2 phases in release of the information for sure. There might be 3 if I'm remembering it, as far as like what they roll out. I know that like the final like numbers where they get really detailed that does take longer. I think it takes over a year. But yeah, we're looking at 2 years now. So I don't know why that is, but
Oh, okay, that's fine.
well,
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the economic, not economic shutdown, but the shutdown due to the pandemic and that sort of thing, and then staffing issues. I think they're still dealing with all of that too. So,
yeah. And then there's administration change in the upper levels. I mean, I said we'll probably need a new one by the time something's really.
Yeah.
I know Wood Creek we all know Wood Creek has grown. How much it has grown, I'm not sure. How much it would change this, I don't know. But the reality is that this is going to be due for an update. In another year or so. Yeah. So, the plan says 2 years after this is voted in, it would be looked at again. So there would, in theory, be another survey, and those demographics could be updated then.
Glossary, maybe, since it's not actually defined, that PCI scale.
Okay. Oh yeah. That's
Improvement
Mm.
project.
okay. I'll do that again.
And then I do have a Wimberley Valley Trails map.
Oh, okay. This is just gross.
And we do get a infinitesimal amount of income from alcohol permits.
That's in the
Yes.
other retail.
The other thing I was thinking, as you've gone through the pictures, like the local pictures where you said this is a good drive, after it was done. Normally when you do a document, do the little captions, like with the Wood Creek pictures, note where the picture was taken and who it was provided by. And then with graphic images from K3, say at the bottom that it's K3's done at the land use workshop on section.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too, whether all the charts that we borrowed from, the Watershed Association or.
Yeah, all.
Any of those, just make sure we attribute those.
Patch.
So
Okay.
the maps,
This froze. Sorry. I don't know.
the maps that Robin has made, that's the hardware requirements.
Yeah, I noticed that some were attributed to something called.
Yeah, we can just go in and make sure. I know that this photo, this person does not own their name on the document, or we will not put it in there. Absolutely not credited. So we can just leave that off. They've given the city the rights to the photo, so it's not a problem either way. But yeah, captions on photos. Some of them had captions originally. It's just really hard to do that formatting stuff in this document. But y'all are absolutely right to bring it back up because
Some of the images that stolen picture we were talking about, it was shifted all the way to the left, maybe it came inside.
So she's gonna deal with the formatting. I literally just threw them in here. This computer crashed on me 2 more times over the weekend, froze, I hate it, I'm going to throw it in my fireplace.
technology is lovely.
I did not have a problem with it until last week. I've deleted the entire hard drive, there's nothing soaking memory on it, I don't know what's wrong with it. Me and it are not anymore. All right, so I got your notes. We need the trails map tab. I need to define PCI, capital development. Jerry's given some edits that will be in the document. Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun provided a whole bunch. Captions on the photos. Justin, you're going to get our graphs. We need to send page 49 graphic to you as well, so you can fix that typo. So our next meeting is in 2 weeks. You will see the final version of this document. Lydia is going to start working on the formatting, so it will be final. So come with any last minute suggestions, edits, cuts, anything. She will work on the deadline for when she'll get that out to us. It'll probably be pretty close because that's a short turnaround.
It is, and I'm going to Nashville Thursday.
Well, if there's a delay, we can always work on the meeting timeline, or, you know, if we have to have another meeting, we could roll out a portion of it or
I
something.
don't see this being a really lengthy thing, because all I'm gonna do is add in the captions, and I'll take this and I'll just, you know, get them in boxes so that we can move them around fairly easily. So, I mean, formatting is easy. This is the hard part. Yeah, content hard, it's, formatting is a lot easier.
Well, it's taken us, you know, what month is it? 8 months now?
Yeah.
That's great. They say they take about 2 years to finish, so we will be right at that concept, or that, you know, by Christmas, it'll have been 2 years since the formation of the original committee. And, you know, they were talking about in council, I think, you know, even like this month or so, about hiring Pegasus. And first, oh crap, I didn't credit them. Well, we talked about crediting them because they did some of the initial work for this. And
Yeah, they did.
we've used and referenced it many times. I mean, we did pay them for a portion of the work, so. Yeah. I don't really know how, so I'm just gonna write Pegasus for the and do work on that. I'm probably gonna forget what that's about. So what I was getting at, yeah, what I was getting at with the discussion on the next meeting is that, in theory, it will be our last. Because after that meeting, it will go to planning and zoning. And depending on what planning and zoning does with it, they might not have any edits, or they might have edits that can simply just be pushed on to council and might not have to come back to us. So possibly after the next meeting, it might be our last. So just kind of plan for that, unless you hear otherwise. You know, we might, planning and zoning might say, oh, we need y'all to hit the drawing board again on XYZ. I can't predict what they're going to do. I do know that we need this to be on their agenda for their September meeting, and that we need to have a September meeting.
We have to have a September meeting because Joe has moved up to council. We have to do, you know,
I think there's some other
some
things.
housekeeping, and then this.
Oh, there's also the recommendations to ordinance review.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, we might be done after in 2 weeks. I'm excited.
One part.
9 a.m. party. That's fine.
So the date for the record, yeah, in 2 weeks.
I think it's September 6th.
Is the holiday? That's the day after.
Yeah, the day off.
Yeah, so I mean, is that date still reasonable, you think? I mean, yeah, because P and Z is supposed to meet
On the 7th.
right. So this would be on their agenda,
Right.
and you would, in theory, have submitted the document by this date, the 1st.
Yeah.
So it would potentially be available in some form to put on P and Z's agenda, and we, you know,
They need to get it. All the other planning and zoning, other than Joe and me, and maybe Thomas has seen part of it, but the rest of them have not. And so, yeah, they'll need time to read it, kind of ingest it before they give edits. Yeah, it's a quick turnaround.
I mean, I don't see us having a whole lot of feedback in the next meeting. I think it's just gonna be like looking at it and being like, oh, this looks great, or shift this around. I mean, we're gonna give you, you know, if you can try to bring in access to this computer, either on a zip drive or I don't know if we'll be able, so that we can work with it in the meeting. So in theory, we could leave the next meeting with the document finalized from us.
that's the goal.
When I looked at this yesterday, Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun had not had with this many edits in it, so that's why I kind of gave up because it turns to be a lot more, and I'll have to process. Some of these paragraphs she chopped up pretty good, so I'll have to, which is fine. I mean, you know,
Well, and it's very print rich, and so there may be some places where I can, you know, cut the wording down a little bit. It'd be great.
absolutely. We're going for content, not,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can, you know, I don't know if you still have that document, but we have a document with a link to a bunch of other comp plans. So if you look at them, they have a lot of words in them, but there's a lot of like, folding of titles with a different color, less on each page. So, you know, this document's only 59 pages long. I think the one from Buda is like 100. You know, some of the other ones I've read, they're massive. So I think we're doing pretty good. And that once you start formatting it, you might realize, okay, there's not as much need here as they thought there was. So, but yeah, if you look at those other plans, you can kind of get some of those design principles.
Well, and also contact me, you know, if I have questions, because I'm going through.
Do you have anything else?
In the
Motion.
That's a motion.
I'll second that.
Alright. Meeting is ended at 10:30. Thank y'all.
I have.
Thank you, Mickey. So nice to meet you finally.
So this P, I mean, you don't get it in P and Z's hands. They're really looking at, I mean, so once these edits are made and, you know, they accept the changes and stuff like that, I mean, you can get it in their hands to just sort of be reading it and getting it to speed. And what they would be looking at is simply the formatted version.
Yeah.
Well, what